70s produced some of the greatest music ever recorded. It also produced some of the corniest. And we are not talking about accidentally corny. We are talking about songs that looked you dead in the eye, smiled warmly, and said something so sincere and so sweet that you did not know whether to laugh or cry. Usually both. Today we are counting down 15 of the corniest songs from the 1970s. These are the tracks you heard on the radio in the car with your parents, the ones your dad sang along to without shame, the ones that felt deeply uncool at the time and yet somehow never left you. Stick around for number 1. It is the most earnest 3 minutes the decade ever produced, and it will almost certainly make you feel things you were not expecting to feel today. If the 70s hold a warm place in your heart, no matter how corny they get, hit that subscribe button and tap the bell so you never miss a retro rewind video. Drop a like if you are ready to celebrate the corn, and tell us in the comments which 70s song makes you smile every single time no matter what. Now let's get into it. Sammy Davis Jr. recorded Candyman in 1972 and delivered it with the full force of a man who had spent 30 years performing at the highest level and had absolutely no intention of underplaying a single note. The result is a song about a confectionery dealer that somehow sounds like the most important thing anyone has ever said into a microphone.
Shake, 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 shake.
The song reached number 1 in the US and stayed there for 3 weeks, which tells you everything you need to know about what America wanted from its pop music in 1972. People were not looking for complexity. They were looking for Sammy Davis Jr. telling them that the Candyman could mix it with love and make the world taste good. And he delivered that promise with everything he had.
This gentleman, who can take us?
Davis's vocal performance is a lesson in commitment. There is not a single moment in the recording where he appears to have had any doubts about what he was doing. Every syllable lands with the precision of a man who had been performing since childhood and knew exactly how to make an audience feel something, even when that something was uncomplicated joy about imaginary sweets.
Cover it with chocolate or a miracle or two. The Candyman.
The original Candyman was written for the 1971 film Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory and performed by Aubrey Woods in the movie. Davis took the song, applied his particular brand of showbiz alchemy, and produced a version so definitive that the original is now the one most people don't know. That is a remarkable feat of artistic possession.
Can, 'cause he mixes it with love to make the world taste good.
Candyman is corn of the purest variety, bright, sweet, slightly overwhelming, and impossible not to smile at. Sammy Davis Jr. made it a number 1 hit through the sheer force of his talent and his complete refusal to do anything by halves. Quick question, did your parents have this one on the record player? Drop it in the comments.
Soak it in the sun and make a groovy pie.
George Harrison spent years in the shadow of Lennon and McCartney, the quiet Beatle whose contributions were consistently undervalued by the band's management and the music press. When the Beatles broke up in 1970, Harrison released All Things Must Pass, a triple album of material he had been storing up for years, and led it with My Sweet Lord, a devotional song of such open-hearted sincerity that it divided critics immediately. It became the first solo Beatles single to reach number 1 in both the US and UK, which answered the critics who thought the spiritual content was too much. Audiences were not put off by a man singing Hare Krishna over a gentle acoustic arrangement. They were moved by it. The sincerity was the point.
Oh boy. All right, I'm on it.
The corn in My Sweet Lord is inseparable from its beauty. Harrison was not being ironic about wanting to see his Lord. He genuinely meant every word, and that level of open spiritual vulnerability from a former Beatle was so unexpected and so undefended that it landed with enormous force on listeners who were themselves searching for something to believe in after the 60s had ended.
Here. What's this?
The song was later the subject of a plagiarism lawsuit over its similarity to He's So Fine by the Chiffons. The court found against Harrison, ruling that the copying was subconscious rather than deliberate. Harrison later wrote this song, a cheerful meditation on the experience of being sued for a melody, which is possibly the least bitter response to losing a court case in music history.
The Bureau wants you to see it. I want you to see it.
I want to see.
My Sweet Lord is Korn because it is completely unguarded. There is no armor in it, no irony, no protective distance between the singer and the sentiment. That openness is both the most vulnerable and the most powerful thing about it. John Denver wrote "Sunshine on My Shoulders" on a gray winter day in Minneapolis when he was missing the mountains of Colorado desperately. He wanted to write something that captured what sunshine felt like when you had been without it for too long. What he produced was one of the most straightforwardly lovely songs of the entire decade, and also one of the It reached #1 in the US in 1974 and became the template for the John Denver sound. Acoustic guitar, clear tenor vocal, nature imagery, and an emotional directness that made more sophisticated listeners uncomfortable and everyone else feel warm and slightly emotional for reasons they could not entirely explain. The lyric does exactly what it says. Sunshine on his shoulders makes him happy. Sunshine in his eyes can make him cry. Sunshine on the water looks so lovely. These are not complicated observations. They are the kind of things a person thinks when they are standing outside on a beautiful day and feeling grateful to be alive. Denver put them in a song and sang them without embarrassment.
On my shoulders.
Denver's critics called him saccharine, naive, and relentlessly wholesome in a decade that prided itself on hard-edged authenticity. His audience called him the best-selling solo artist in America for several years running. The two groups were measuring completely different things, as critics and audiences often do. Sunshine on My Shoulders is the song that plays in your head on the first warm day of spring when you walk outside and close your eyes and tilt your face toward the sun. John Denver wrote that moment down and gave it back to you. There is nothing corny about that except everything, and everything about it is wonderful. Stevie Wonder released "You Are the Sunshine of My Life" in 1972 as the lead single from the Talking Book album, and it immediately demonstrated the remarkable range of what his new creative freedom was going to sound like. Here was the same artist who would write "Living for the City" and "Higher Ground," and he was also this, a song so warm and so sweet it practically glows.
London is the sunshine of my life.
The song reached #1 in the US and won the Grammy for Best Male Pop Vocal Performance. The opening vocal is actually performed by Jim Gilstrap and Lonnie Groves, two backing singers, before Wonder takes over, a detail that surprises most listeners who have heard the song 100 times without noticing the voice change. The corn here is entirely intentional and entirely controlled. Wonder knew exactly what he was writing. The sunshine metaphor, the first thing on his mind, the feeling that has been around a very long time. These are the building blocks of the most traditional love song construction imaginable. Wonder chose them deliberately and executed them with such musicianship that the familiarity becomes... You Are the Sunshine of My Life sits on the same album as Superstition, which is one of the funkiest and most sophisticated recordings of the decade. The contrast between the two tracks demonstrates something important about Wonder's genius. He could operate at every emotional temperature simultaneously and be equally masterful at each extreme. Some songs are corny because they are careless. You Are the Sunshine of My Life is corny because it is precise. Wonder knew the exact emotional effect he was going for and achieved it completely. That is not a failure of ambition. That is ambition fully realized.
Loved you for a million years.
Morris Albert released Feelings in 1974, and it became one of the defining easy listening records of the mid-70s. A song so committed to the expression of vague, generalized emotional pain that it became the template for an entire generation of similar recordings. The feeling being described is never specified. It is simply the song reached number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100 and became an international hit across dozens of markets. It was particularly successful in easy listening and adult contemporary formats, where its combination of lush orchestration, gentle melody, and lyrics that required no prior knowledge of the specific emotion. The genius of Feelings is its vagueness. Any listener who had ever experienced any feeling of any kind could locate themselves in it. Heartbreak, longing, nostalgia, regret. The song accommodates all of them without committing to any particular one. This is either a remarkable feat of emotional inclusivity or a complete absence of
more than feeling.
Morris Albert was Brazilian, and the song was written in a hotel room in a single afternoon. It has been covered hundreds of times, parodied even more, and used as the cultural shorthand for a particular kind of overwrought 70s sentiment that has never entirely gone away. Every decade produces its equivalent of
Feelings of love.
Feelings as corn of the most elemental kind. It strips everything back to the simplest possible emotional statement and repeats it until it either moves you or makes you reach for the dial. The remarkable thing is how often it moves you. Something in those unspecified feelings touches something real. Morris Albert understood that emotions do not always need a specific address.
Rolling down on
Tie a Yellow Ribbon Round the Old Oak Tree is the story of a man returning home after 3 years in prison, who writes to the woman he loves asking her to put a yellow ribbon on the oak tree outside her house if she still wants him. If the ribbon isn't there, he will stay on the bus and accept that it is over. When the bus approaches home, there are 100 yellow ribbons. It is unbearably sweet and completely corny and absolutely wonderful. The song spent 4 weeks at number 1 in the US and 6 weeks at number 1 in the UK in 1973. It became one of the best-selling singles of the decade and inspired a real-world tradition of tying yellow ribbons as symbols of welcome and hope that has continued for 50 years. A pop song changed the visual language of homecoming in America. That does not happen very often.
I'm coming home, I've done my time.
Tony Orlando has said that he almost didn't record it, finding the sentiment a little too sentimental even by his standards. His producer convinced him otherwise. The public response made the decision look not just correct but inevitable. Sometimes the songs that feel too sincere to record are exactly the ones that
If you receive my letter telling you
The yellow ribbon tradition was famously revived during the Iran hostage crisis in 1979 and again during various military deployments in subsequent decades. A song about a man coming home from prison became a symbol of national solidarity and the hope of reunion. That transformation is one of the most remarkable things a piece of pop music has ever achieved.
if you still want me, if you still
Tie a Yellow Ribbon is the corn that became culture. It started as a 3-minute story about a bus ride and a tree, and it ended up changing how Americans express the hope of coming home. Not bad for something Tony Orlando almost didn't bother recording.
ribbon around the old tree, it's been 3
Afternoon Delight won the Grammy for Best New Artist in 1977, which tells you something about the state of the Grammy selection process in 1977. The song is a warm, harmonically rich piece of soft rock about the joy of a midday romantic encounter, delivered with such cheerful innocence that many listeners did not immediately register what the afternoon delight being described actually was. It reached #1 in the US in 1976, and the Starland vocal band briefly became one of the most recognizable acts in America. The harmonies are genuinely beautiful, the production is immaculate, and the arrangement has a gentle bounce that makes it feel like a perfectly pleasant summer afternoon, regardless of what you choose to believe the lyrics are about.
Gonna find my baby.
The song became famous all over again when the television show Arrested Development used it as a running joke, with characters enthusiastically misunderstanding its meaning. An entirely new generation discovered it and found exactly the same combination of charm and mild bewilderment that the original audience had experienced. Some songs are built for rediscovery.
My motto's always been when it's right, why wait until the middle of a
Starland vocal band members Bill and Taffy Danoff had previously co-written Take Me Home Country Roads with John Denver, which explains both the harmonic sophistication and the cheerful wholesomeness of their work. They had a specific gift for making comfortable, warm music that asked nothing difficult of its audience and delivered exactly what it promised.
and we know the night is always
Afternoon Delight is corn of the most specific variety, the kind that is entirely aware of itself and winking at you from behind its own innocence. The Grammy win remains one of the institution's more spirited decisions. Quick question, did you know what this song was actually about the first time you heard it? Drop it in the comments. Frankie Valli had been one of the defining voices of the 1960s with the Four Seasons, and by 1975 he was delivering My Eyes Adored You, a nostalgic ballad about a childhood love that was never acted upon, delivered in his distinctive falsetto with the kind of tender regret that only works when it is completely sincere. It works completely. The song reached #1 in the US in 1975 and marked a significant commercial comeback for Valli after several years of reduced chart presence. The lyric is simple, specific, and disarmingly honest. He carried books for her, walked her home, worshipped her from a distance, and she never knew. That specific variety of unrequited adolescent devotion is something almost everyone recognizes from their own past. The Corn in My Eyes Adored You comes from its complete lack of irony about the feelings it is describing. Valli does not present the childhood crush with any protective distance. He presents it as something genuinely important, genuinely beautiful, and genuinely worth singing about decades later. That refusal to be embarrassed by tenderness is the song's greatest quality.
My eyes adored you.
Bob Crew and Kenny Nolan wrote the song specifically for Valli's voice and his particular ability to deliver vulnerability without sentimentality tipping into self-pity. Valli's falsetto gives the lyric an almost boyish quality that suits the subject matter perfectly. He sounds, even as a grown man, like someone remembering what it felt like to be young and hopelessly smitten.
Eyes adored you. Like a million miles away.
My Eyes Adored You is the song for everyone who had a childhood love they never told. It does not dramatize the loss, it simply remembers it warmly. That gentleness is the most disarming kind of corn. It arrives quietly and stays long after you expected it to leave.
So close and yet so far.
You Light Up My Life spent 10 weeks at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1977, setting a record that would stand for years. 10 weeks. That is not a hit. That is a sustained occupation of the national consciousness. Debbie Boone, daughter of Pat Boone, delivered it with such clear-voiced conviction that radio programmers apparently could not bring themselves to stop playing it. The song was written by Joe Brooks for a low-budget film of the same name and originally performed by a different singer entirely. Boone's recording took on a life that nobody connected to the film had anticipated. It crossed over from religious radio to pop radio to adult contemporary and found audiences in all three formats simultaneously, which is a rare commercial achievement. The lyric can be interpreted as a love song to a romantic partner or as a devotional hymn, depending on what the listener brings to it. Boone herself has said she always intended it as the latter. This ambiguity is part of why it reached so many different audiences. Each group heard the version they needed to hear. Critics at the time were not gentle about "You Light Up My Life." Words like saccharine, trachely, and relentlessly sentimental appeared frequently in reviews. The public ignored every word of the criticism and kept buying it. 10 Weeks at #1 is a fairly comprehensive rebuttal of the critical consensus.
Inside me, alone in the dark.
You Light Up My Life is the undisputed champion of sincere 70s corn, and it earned that title through sheer democratic force. America heard it, embraced it, and kept it at #1 for 2.5 months. Some songs simply find their moment and refuse to leave until they are finished.
And you.
Muskrat Love is a song about two muskrats falling in love. Their names are Muskrat Susie and Muskrat Sam. They dance, they nibble on bacon and cheese. Susie appreciates Sam's charm. Sam has a dreamy look in his eye. They whirl and twirl and tango. This is the entire content of the song, and it reached #4 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1976. Captain and Tennille were one of the most commercially successful acts of the mid-70s, and Muskrat Love was the song that tested exactly how far audience goodwill could stretch. The answer apparently was all the way to #4. The sound effects of actual muskrats, or something designed to represent muskrats, were included in the production. Nobody questioned this decision publicly at the time.
Muskrat, candlelight, doing the town.
The song was written by Willis Allen Ramsey in 1972 and originally recorded as a more straightforward acoustic folk piece called Muskrat Candlelight. America's Tony Tennille heard it and decided it needed full production treatment, synthesizers, and the muskrat sound effects. The transformation from folk meditation to novelty pop is one of the more dramatic reinventions in the decade's recording history.
It's pretty pleasing.
Muskrat Love was performed at the White House for Queen Elizabeth II during her 1976 bicentennial visit to the United States. The Queen's reaction has not been recorded for posterity. President Ford appeared to be enjoying himself. This moment exists in the historical record and cannot be undone.
Muskrat Sam, do the jitterbug at it.
Muskrat Love is the purest corn on this list because it has absolutely no pretensions to being anything other than what it is, a cheerful song about two muskrats who are very fond of each other. In a decade full of songs trying to say something important, there is something almost radical about a song that simply celebrates small furry animals being happy together.
Sam is so skinny.
The Carpenters recorded Sing in 1973 and released it with a children's choir joining Karen Carpenter's already immaculate vocal. The song was originally written for Sesame Street, which tells you its intended emotional register precisely, Sesame Street. And yet it reached #3 on the Billboard Hot 100 and became one of the Carpenters' best-loved recordings. The lyric instructs you to sing a song, to sing out loud, to sing out strong, and not to worry that it is not good enough for anyone else to hear. This is the entirety of the message. It is a song about the simple act of singing for joy, delivered by one of the greatest pure singers of the 20th century, which gives it a kind of ironic depth it was probably not designed to have. Karen Carpenter's voice on Sing is remarkable precisely because she brings her full instrument to bear on material that asks almost nothing of it technically. She sings it as if it is the most important song she has ever recorded. That commitment elevates the corn into something genuinely moving. The best singer of her generation telling you that your singing matters too, even if it is nothing like hers.
Sing out loud, sing out strong.
Richard Carpenter has spoken about the decision to include the children's choir and how it transformed the recording from a pleasant pop song into something that felt genuinely joyful and communal. The children's voices are not a gimmick. They are the point. The song is about singing together, and the choir makes that literal.
Things not bad.
Sing is corn that knows exactly what it is and embraces it completely. A Sesame Street song performed by one of the greatest voices of the decade, accompanied by a children's choir, telling you to sing out loud even if nobody is listening. On a bad day, that message lands harder than it has any right to.
Sing, sing us.
Seasons in the Sun is a song about a man saying goodbye to everyone he loves because he is dying. He says goodbye to his father, his best friend, and Michelle, the girl whose roses he climbed, and whose lips he apparently kissed a few too many times. He notes that they had joy, they had fun, and they had seasons in the sun. He then dies. The song spent 3 weeks at #1 in the US in 1974. The song is an adaptation of a Belgian folk song called Le Moribond, written by Jacques Brel in 1961. The original French version is considerably darker. The dying man is rather more candid about his feelings toward his best friend and his wife than Terry Jacks' English adaptation suggests. Jacks softened the edges considerably and produced something that occupies a unique tonal space between genuine poignancy and magnificent corn.
We've known each other since we were 9 or 10.
The production is a complete product of its time. Lush strings, gentle acoustic guitar, a vocal that wobbles between sadness and the kind of upbeat resignation that only the 70s could produce. Jack sounds like he is genuinely sad about the dying, but also determined not to let it bring the mood down too much. This balance should not work. It absolutely works.
Learned of love and ABC and skinned our
Seasons in the Sun became one of the best-selling singles of 1974 internationally, and has been covered many times since, most notably by Westlife in 1999, who took it back to #1 in the UK. The song's ability to make generation after generation feel vaguely emotional about a man they have never met saying farewell to people they have never heard of is one of pop music's more enduring mysteries.
when all the birds are singing in the sky.
Seasons in the Sun is the corn that made people cry on their way to work in the morning. It is completely unashamed of its own sentimentality, and the sentimentality is completely genuine. There is a man dying, and he had joy, and he had fun, and he had seasons in the sun. You cannot argue with any of that.
Pretty girls are everywhere.
Puff the Magic Dragon was released in 1963 and has occupied a unique position in popular culture ever since. A song that adults insist is about drugs, that Peter, Paul, and Mary have always insisted is not about drugs. And that is actually, on every available piece of evidence, simply a song about a little boy named Jackie Paper who has an imaginary dragon friend and then grows up and stops believing in him. The song reached #2 on the Billboard Hot 100 and became one of the most beloved recordings of the decade. The drug interpretation was a cultural artifact of the late 60s counterculture's tendency to find hidden meanings in everything. The name Puff, the land of Honolulu, the autumn mist. Peter Yarrow has addressed the interpretation countless times with a patience that speaks to either extraordinary good nature or extraordinary exhaustion. What the song is actually about, a child's imagination fading as they grow into adulthood, is considerably sadder than any drug interpretation. Puff stops eating and playing when Jackie Paper no longer comes to visit. He puts his head down and is not the same after that. The dragon's loneliness in the final verse is genuinely affecting if you allow yourself to take it at face value. The corn in Puff the Magic Dragon is the corn of childhood itself. Brightly colored, completely earnest, and carrying a grief underneath the brightness that only becomes visible when you are old enough to understand what Jackie Paper gave up when he stopped coming to visit. Some songs are corny on the surface and devastating underneath. Puff the Magic Dragon is the song that every child loves and every adult secretly loves while pretending to find it too simple. The simplicity is the point. The autumn mist and the pirate ships and the sealing wax are the world as a child sees it, and the song mourns the moment that world stops being visible. That is not corn. That is one of the saddest things pop music has ever described. Bobby Goldsboro released Honey in 1968, and it spent 5 weeks at #1, making it one of the most commercially successful recordings of the year. The song tells the story of a man remembering his late wife, Honey, how she planted a tree that grew, how she cried at a movie, how she wrecked the car, how she laughed at him, and then she got sick and died, and the tree she planted keeps growing without her. The production is orchestral and lush and absolutely committed to wringing every available drop of emotion from the listener. Goldsboro's vocal is earnest to the point of fragility, which suits the material perfectly. He sounds like a man who has not finished grieving and is not sure he ever will. That genuineness is what elevates Honey above simple corn into something more complicated.
See the tree, how big it's grown, but friend, it has.
Critics in 1968 were not kind to Honey. It was called manipulative, maudlin, and a calculated attempt to produce tears on demand. These criticisms are not entirely wrong. The song does everything in its power to make you cry, and it does not apologize for any of it. The question is whether manufacturing an emotional response is a lesser achievement than producing one accidentally. 5 weeks at #1 suggests the audience was not troubled by the question.
I laughed at her and she got mad the first day that.
Honey has been cited by numerous artists over the decades as one of the most effective tearjerker recordings ever made. Effective being a neutral term that acknowledges the craft without necessarily endorsing the approach. The craft is real. The tree growing without honey in it is a genuinely beautiful image. The corn and the genuine feeling exist in the same song and cannot be separated.
Then the first snow came and she ran out to brush the.
Honey is the song that made an entire generation cry in 1968 and has been making people cry at unexpected moments ever since. The tree is still growing, Bobby Goldsboro is still singing about it, and the corn is still as real and as sweet and as slightly overwhelming as it ever was.
Came running in, all excited, slipped.
Bob Carlyle wrote Butterfly Kisses for his daughter Brooke on her 16th birthday in 1996, sitting at his kitchen table with a guitar and no particular plan. He was simply trying to find words for what it felt like to watch a little girl become a young woman. What came out was a song so sweetly, devastatingly corny that it became one of the biggest hits of 1997 and made fathers across America cry in public without any apparent embarrassment. The song describes butterfly kisses, a child pressing her eyelashes against a parent's cheek as a goodnight gesture. From infancy through to the wedding day, it moves through years of small moments with the kind of specific tenderness that only works when it is drawn from real memory. Carlyle was not writing about a generic daughter. He was writing about Brooke, and every detail in the song is particular enough to feel true even to people who have never met either of them. Butterfly Kisses reached #1 on the adult contemporary chart and crossed over to the pop chart with a combined sales figure that made it one of the year's best-selling singles. It won the Grammy for Best Country Song despite not being a country song, which suggests the Grammy committee understood they were dealing with something that transcended category.
She was sent here from heaven, and and she's daddy's little.
The Corn in Butterfly Kisses is total and complete and entirely on purpose. There is not a single moment in the song where Carlisle steps back from the emotion or softens the sentiment with irony or complexity. He goes all the way in and stays there for the entire recording. That level of commitment to pure, undefended feeling is what makes people cry. Not the manipulation of it, but the sincerity of it.
At night, she talks to Jesus.
Butterfly Kisses is #1 on this list because it represents everything Korn can be at its absolute best. Specific, sincere, completely unguarded, and capable of making a grown man cry at a kitchen table just by writing down something true about someone he loves. It is not trying to be anything other than what it is, and what it is will make you think about someone you love before this sentence is finished.
All of the joy in my life.
From Sammy Davis Jr. making the world taste good to Bob Carlisle pressing eyelashes against a cheek, the 1970s and beyond gave us songs that were never afraid of their own sweetness. These were not songs trying to be cool. They were songs trying to be true, and the truth they were telling about love, about home, about loss, about the small moments that make up a life, turned out to be something people needed to hear. The best Korn is not empty. It is full of something real that has been delivered without armor. These songs trusted their listeners to feel things without being told how to feel them, and their audiences responded by making them #1 and singing along for 50 years. That is not a failure of taste. That is taste working exactly as it should. So tell us in the comments, which one is your personal favorite piece of 70s Korn? Which one did we miss that absolutely belongs on this list? And which one made you feel something just now that you were not expecting? Drop it below. We read every single one.